Richmond, north of Richmond, Lord knows they all just wanna have total control. Living in
That is such a valuable piece of advice there.
These are the sorts of things that we should talk about right in the first 5 minutes of the podcast.
Started giving people free quotes.
In sunshine and rainbows, it isn't
a thing for just being a solo operator.
The change in mindset makes a massive difference.
Welcome to Aussie Lawn Stars.
Thank you for listening to Aussie Lawn Stars. Please remember to rate and review the show on the Apple Podcasts app or the player you use. Exciting new shows are released every Monday. Make sure you follow or subscribe to hear the next episode.
Welcome to Aussie Lawn Stars. Brodie, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, Garry. Good, thanks.
Now, Brodie Pitt Owen, say that right?
That's correct, yes.
And Brodie, you're probably reasonably well known on the contractor groups, but you are not too far away from me. You travel around Sydney, and it means that we had the opportunity to meet up face-to-face last week.
We did. We were fortunate enough to come out to site for you, and we did some Air Spade work with you and showed you the new technology.
Yeah, so after doing an interview with Rion in Canberra, he was talking about the fact that the Air Spade is one of those tools which is really good, and he doesn't actually have access to one. But after you heard that interview, you contacted me directly because you have an Air Spade, you own it, and I'm guessing you use it reasonably regularly.
Yeah, we use it a lot more, or we used to use it a lot more for our tree consultancy. So my background is in tree and tree management, urban tree management. So I'm a consultant level arborist and have been for 10 years. So we use that a lot as our major consulting tool, and we specialise in root investigations, mainly pre-construction, sometimes post-construction, just to inform build teams of we help design their scope of works, get them through that council stage of compliance, of knowing what the tree's doing and how far and how close they can build to it. As you can imagine, the Sydney region's got a few trees in it and not a lot of space when you start building houses en masse. So councils like to see that.
So for people listening, I think I'm mindful of the fact that when people listen to an interview like this, we really need to dumb it down for them and make sure they understand what we're talking about really clearly. Because even though you're speaking very sensibly, people will be going, hang on a minute, Air Spade. And then they'll have to rewind you. What were they talking about? So what we are talking about is a unique tool that is using compressed air, high volume compressed air, not just high pressure, but high volume compressed air, to remove soil subterranean around the root zones of trees. It can be used for doing a number of things, but that's one of its main uses, is to remove soil around the root zone and do it in a safe way that allows you to find the roots and not damage the roots. And you've mentioned a couple of ways that's really helpful for development work.
Yeah. The Air Spade is it's a tool from the US, designed in the US. Tend to have all the good stuff. Such a large population, having such a large population, as with all our equipment that we use, they're a bit ahead of us. So we imported it from the US. It is a tool that uses about 185 cubic feet of air per minute at 100 psi. Now, what that does to the soil is it fractures it and displaces. So when we are using it around tree roots or sensitive services, electrical, water, gas, telephone cable, NBN, that sort of stuff, we can actually get quite close to the point of the tool touching. It is fully insulated, when we do come across those electrical circuits. But it means that we can get incredibly close and incredibly accurate results when we're looking for either services or roots for trees and plants. So the air will fracture the soil, but it does very little damage to the living tissue of the tree.
So when people are comparing their options, the first option people will go to is an excavator, or if they're dealing with concrete, they're going through a jackhammer. There's various things they'll need to go through to remove different layers and different levels to get down to where they might do excavation work or to inspect services, whatever that might be. When they're finding services, often they will use a, I think it's ultrasound or ultrasound ground penetrating radar, I think is the words they use.
Yeah, so
otherwise,
common tools are ground penetrating radar, and we can find roots with ground penetrating radar. It's incredibly specialised to do a root mapping with the ground penetrating radar because everything looks the same. What you'll get in a ground penetrating is much like it. If you've ever been out on a boat fishing, you'll get the arcs the same as you would on a fish finder. It'll show that something's there, but it won't show what it is. It'll show how big, but not its density. So it's very hard to determine between the two. The other locating tools are your cable identification wands for services.
Yeah. And then once you go beyond those non-invasive tools, you're using a bucket on an excavator, or the other one, which is less invasive than an excavator, is a vac truck. And a vac truck has high pressure water and a vacuum to suck everything away.
Correct. So yeah, we can, that's your usual avenue. High pressure water with a vacuum truck. We also use the vacuum truck with the Air Spade. If we do have a large job to get spoil out of. Downside to a high pressure water jet with a vacuum truck, it's running at anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 psi.
Yeah.
And can cut through a lot of things if you don't have the correct operator.
No doubt.
So, high pressure water's used for a lot of cutting operations, and it's no different there with sensitive infrastructure and untrained operators. It can be quite detrimental, especially when we're talking about tree and tree management.
Yeah, well, I guess the other factor there is, and I was mindful of this when you visited my site on last week, we have found on occasion where a vac truck has been on site to identify services, they have sometimes damaged the wires I have in the ground for robotic mowers.
Correct. And that's where that high pressure water comes in. It can really do some damage. I've seen a steel cat boot get cut in half with one. It's not pretty. But interestingly enough, the other issue that you get with a vac truck is that once it goes in the vac as a wet slurry, it's actually considered bio-waste. So it has to be either stored on site in a dedicated containment system, or it needs to be taken to specialised contaminated waste facilities. So it adds a level of complexity and cost to a project that doesn't need to be there. Yeah,
so the Air Spade as an alternative is, like you say, 100 psi, so it's much lower pressure. There is still some risk with 100 psi air, and people need to be cautious with it. But your risk of damaging services or where your specialty is in looking after trees, the majority of the risk there is mitigated because it is fairly low pressure compared to all of the alternatives. And obviously an excavator is going to break roots and wreck them. You're not going to be able to identify a root zone and work to improve a tree's health with an excavator.
Look, we do on occasion work with an excavator and the Air Spade in tandem. It's not necessarily the fastest digging tool for large areas. So when we do, we've done installations around the trees in significant parks around the city. That takes quite some time to trench with the Air Spade, so we'll quite often do a first cut with the excavator and then come through with the Air Spade just to clear it all out, make sure they're right to go, and we keep digging.
Yeah.
So it's a very versatile tool in that it's got different avenues of use, especially when you're talking about protecting tree infrastructure.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's where it really shines in terms of the overall options people can choose from. The Air Spade allows you to be able to work with a tree around the root zone in a way that most of the other tools have more limitations.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah. So I guess the second question that comes up there, so first one is why would you use that tool? What is it? What is it competing with? But the second question there is, why would you actually want to work around the roots of a tree? And that's where the previous interview, the interview with Rion a couple of weeks ago, came up. And that was because he was talking about rejuvenating trees, and I was talking about it from the point of view of recognizing that a lot of plants, particularly hedges that are really thirsty plants, will struggle depending on where they're planted or whether they have good quality soil to work with. There's a number of issues that go on with that, and that's where you're working more predominantly with trees rather than small hedge plants. But often plants will struggle, their health will struggle because they cannot get nutrition out of the soil.
Yeah, I mean, we work with all sizes of plants these days. We've expanded the services out to, we work predominantly in retirement villages for our mowing and gardening services, and we'll routinely use the Air Spade when we're working around trees and infrastructure within those environments. But yeah, predominantly we will use the Air Spade for soil amelioration to help to build a better soil profile. You'd be amazed at the soils around the Sydney Basin, for want some of the worst soils, just by way of excavation. When we build these new developments, we tend to take all the good stuff away and leave the stuff that's really good for building on, and not so much for growing stuff in.
Yeah.
The tool allows us to break up that soil profile in a way that's not too aggressive.
Yeah.
You can excavate with an excavator, dig a hole, put new soil in. What you tend to end up with is an inverted soil profile. Inverted soil profiles tend to be a little bit more detrimental to tree health in the longer term, in that you've now got that organic matter on the bottom side, and you get things, nitrogen drawdown, less access to all the good stuff that the tree once had or plant once had. So using the Air Spade, we can fracture the soil, we can naturally introduce air pockets.
Yep.
We can, the demonstration that I did for you or so back was that we actually brought in new soil, mixed the two together with the spade. So we're fracturing both at the same time and mixing them with the air, and sort of fostering that, fostering an environment that's positive for tree health, rather than we can throw topsoil onto old soil and eventually it'll work its way down, or we can open up that soil profile and work it down.
The other one,
relatively.
The other one that I think Rion referred to by name, I think you did the same thing for me there, is called potholing, or kind of looks like an aerator has made a 2-inch hole at the top level, but underneath it's actually fractured the soil open a fair bit.
Yeah, so potholing's, it is very much like a oversized aerator's gone through, but it's usually a grid-spaced pattern. We usually it's somewhere between 30 centimetre by 30 centimetre hole spacings, and we shove the air spade down through the soil profile as it goes down. It fractures the soil profile, introduces air. The soil that we had the other week was quite sandy, but in a more clay-based soil, we can actually get a heave to the soil, which is quite beneficial, because we're then fracturing the soil metres around the hole rather than just at that hole level. Different to a core aerator or an auger, where you can achieve similar results. We're not glancing the side of the hole and making it a smooth transition through the soil.
Yes,
we're actually breaking it apart. So we do get that water infiltration, the air infiltration that you don't necessarily get when you put an auger into the soil. Yeah,
so an auger or a core aerator is going to make a very vertical wall hole that is 1 inch or whatever size it might be, 3/4 of an inch, some of the small ones, which means that hole, then with very hard sides to it, is not going to allow the nutrition and the water to penetrate out from the hole easily. I guess one of the other things you mentioned there is in terms of an excavator inverting the soil profile if you're digging garden beds. And I think that's probably not a major issue when you've got a very sandy soil profile, but when you've got a very clay-based soil profile, it is where if the clay ends up on the top and the compost and plant matter ending up under the clay, it does trap that, and the water can't penetrate through that top clay layer. And so I think that was where the conversation with Rion started. I was talking to him about adding fertilizer to plants at the ground level and hoping that it works its way through. And if you're doing a granular fertilizer, you water it in and the water will carry it down the first 30, 40, 50 millimetres deep, hopefully to the root zone, and activated. And then that's where it's able to do its work. If it's a compost, manure, or some sort of plant matter, it's often just going to sit on top and act a little bit like your dead grass if you get thatching on your grass.
Correct. The other issue that you have when you're doing a granular fertilizer is that if it is only going down that 30, 40 mil, that's where you're going to get the majority of your root.
Yes.
And we call them feeder roots.
Yep.
Because essentially that's what they're doing for the tree or the plant, but they're absorbing roots is the technical term.
Yeah.
If the tree's getting all its nutrient from the first 30 to 40 mil of soil, it's not going to put energy into deeper root profile growth. So you will get a shallow root system. For a smaller hedge tree, not as big an issue. For a larger tree, there's some stability issues there. But it also lends itself much the same as it would for your lawn in even a mildest of droughts. that root profile is going to dry out relatively quickly. Now, a decent sized tree, sort of 5 metres in height, eucalypt, you're talking about 1,000 litres a day that it actually needs to survive. And that's survival, not survival plus new growth. That's maintenance.
Yeah.
So, I don't think anybody really puts 1,000 litres of water onto a plant each day.
No.
But that's realistically what it needs, and the bigger you go, obviously the more water you're going to need. So, if that root profile is quite high in the soil profile, it's going to dry out relatively quickly. Whereas there is actually a lot of stored moisture and nutrient in a good soil profile, down quite low.
So when I've talked about planting a hedge, I often talk about making the hole for each plant the size you want the roots to grow to. And on a hedge, I would typically describe the root zone as being similar to the foliage width. So, and then if you're going, say, 1 metre wide on your hole for the plant, if you're going for a large hedge, then I would also go 1 metre deep and make sure that entire cubic metre of soil is reasonably good quality, which often means using some of the original soil and then mixing high nutrition value back in with it. If you're using an excavator, obviously you can turn the soil and keep on turning it till you get that to the point where you want it to be, rather than just inverting it and putting the rubbish at the top and the good stuff at the bottom. But like you say, with a lot of new subdivisions, a lot of development work, they're not doing any of that. If they turn the soil at all, I'm surprised with some of them, and it's not great quality. So trying to add a little bit of wood chip to the top after you've got just clay sitting there, and plants that are planted directly into clay where their roots are root bound like in a pot, putting a little bit of forestry mulch or arbor mulch on top of that is not really going to fix the problem.
It's not going to fix the problem. It's not going to hurt.
Yeah.
The amount of clients that we've been to that have wanted to put down rock in their garden bed, and I despise rock as a garden bed mulch. It's
yes,
it provides nothing.
Of course.
If my go-to is if you want nothing else, go to a sugarcane mulch. It's cheap, it's cost effective. It breaks down quickly and adds to the soil. If you want to step up from that, then go and get some arborist mulch. Most guys are giving it away because they can't store it. So you get it at a really decent rate. But the benefit of arborist mulch is it's got that leaf matter in it, so the leaf matter breaks down really quickly. It encourages organic decomposition from soil microbes. Now, if they're not in the soil, they're more than likely going to be attracted to come into the soil if there's something to feed on. And this is the problem that we're seeing more and more with new development, is that for acres and acres, there's no insect life in the soil anymore because we're stripping that away. We're going back to hard clay. And I mean, you can bring in as much soil as you want, but the ecosystem of plants, be it lawn, be it trees, be it bushes, be it a hedge, needs its micro inputs from insect life. It needs fungal life in the soil. Not all fungi's wonderful and great, but it does need the beneficials. So for trees, we look at mycorrhizal fungi as being one of the more beneficial fungi for a tree. It's a relationship that the tree needs. It's a relationship the tree needs to support other micro life around a tree's root system.
And I think we've all heard about death cap mushrooms if you want to get into some of the fungi that's not so great to be around. But what you're talking about there, the mycorrhizal fungi, you can introduce artificially, or if you are adding decaying plant matter, so whether it's through your arborist mulch or whether you are using a composting system, a wormweed farm, all those different things allow you to introduce things that break down and attract the bugs and the worms and the things that will then integrate that plant matter into the soil profile fairly quickly. If you have active worms, you know that they are going to help transfer the decaying plant matter from the top layers down in through the rest of the layers, and that's where you're going to get that fungal interaction between the decaying plant matter and the root zone.
Correct. I mean, if you really want to know whether you're going to have a hard day at work, put a shovel in the ground, take a sample out. If there's nothing moving around in there, it's going to be a hard day. It's a discussion that's come up multiple times. Who supplies bugs en masse? Any day of the week, we'd buy kilos of beneficial, worms and other boring insects, or soil boring insects, and plant them with trees or bushes, or add them to our gardens, because it's the thing that's lacking, and it makes life real hard.
Yeah. So a lot of farming practices these days are all about using artificial means of doing everything, which eliminates all those important things. You're working with soil that no longer has any nutrition in it. You're just adding artificial nutrition. You're working with an environment which is not returning back to the soil things that are needed. So what we're talking about here is saying, okay, through the tools you've got and the understanding you've got, using an air spade or whatever else you need to do when you're planting plants out, when you're looking for what's going wrong with plants, these are things which can make a massive difference.
Yeah, huge difference.
When we dug under the roots of one plant last week, what did we say? It was just rock, or possibly even just car park underneath it. And it's like, well, that's what you'll find under a lot of plants. There's a reason why some plants are not thriving. And if you can look at that, it's pretty quick to go, yep, we can see exactly what's going on there.
Yeah, look, it's. I think that particular plant or row of plants that we investigated, I dug down probably 200 to 300 mil, and found a hard surface. I then did some potholing next to it to see what was going on, and found that wherever I could get down far enough, we were finding the same base layer. That would indicate to me that there's probably tar under there, or it's old car park or something. Yeah. Which essentially means that those trees are now growing in a pot. 200 to 300 mil pot. Yeah, essentially. And, it's a vast open space of asphalt there. Asphalt gets quite hot. I know I don't enjoy walking across the car park barefoot, but that heat transference would more than likely be transferring under those plants. Yeah. Trees don't do things, or plants don't do things that are unbeneficial to themselves. So if they're going to burn their roots, they're not going to go near it.
I think what that means is that the last 4 years, that soil has been okay for those plants to survive and even look like they're thriving. And I did mention to you that there was a little bit of a problem with some of those, the Morayas, a little bit of a problem. You could see the yellowing of the leaf on some of them. So they weren't thriving, definitely. But
No.
this year we are going from 4 years of feast to what at the moment is looking like famine. Everything's dried out. We're getting some really hot weather. It's not going to take a lot of that. And those plants are going to be, like you say, burnt to a crisp, really struggling and not going to find nutrition. They're barely going to survive if they do.
Yeah, well, I mean, the example would be go and get a new plant from the nursery and it's, nice black pot, leave it on the back of your ute for, even a day and watch how much it wilts and how much work it takes to bring it back from what it was when you bought it. Urban tree or plant management doesn't get easier when we put in all the layers of function that we need to use that environment. Car parks, curbing, guttering, services. For whatever reason, they never put NBN cables down during the build, so they're always trenching in under the plant infrastructure after they've built the environment. And this is what we deal with as horticulturists or garden contractors.
Efficiency is the thing that rules a business and the decisions you make as a small business owner. Right Mowers give you the options in their product lineup to match efficiency with size, fuel usage and the type of jobs you want to target, from catching to mulching or side discharge, from roadside verges to acreages and manicured lawns to 6 feet tall and super long. I've been using the Right Stander I 42-inch with a Catch Pro for manicured areas and the Stander ZK61 to maximise productivity for large open acreage mowing. If you need to replace your push mower, try the 32-inch Stander B. If you have more open access to residential properties, there's a 42 through to 48-inch option that suits you. And if you want to enter the acreage market, the 52, 61 and 72-inch machines have choices in engine size and model type to suit the work you want it to do. Right Standards go the distance, saving you time and money, season after season. Well, I think that's a really good topic to get into, Brodie, because I spend a lot of time talking to gardeners, lawn mowing contractors, and horticulturists and landscapers. And in our field, there is a massive discrepancy between one end and the other. And we can label cowboys, but they can happen regardless of their qualifications. But certainly, the value in our field in Australia, and I've had numerous people contact me and say, we need to get everybody in our field to work towards a qualification so that we can up the game and make sure that everybody's on the same field. And
I've had numerous discussions with numerous people, be it online or in person. I've had multiple conversations with yourself. And I think I've changed my point of view just talking to you over the last couple of weeks multiple times. So, but I think the consensus that I've come to personally is that look, I'm happy for anyone to go out and start their own business, do their own thing. That's all good. But as a qualified horticulturalist, I'd love to have them come and work for me for, 6 months a year, and gain a bit of knowledge. I think there's a big knowledge gap, and I appreciate that you can sort of go out and it's a very low barrier to entry industry to get into. But there's also a knowledge gap that you miss out on by not having, not going through an industry trained channel, be it TAFE or otherwise, an apprenticeship scheme. There's always going to be a gap, and that's not to say that I'm walking around knowing everything there is to know about garden and lawn care, but my understanding of how to find out the information that I need is shortened.
But if you look at the alternatives, somebody coming into our industry from the low barrier to entry, coming in at the easiest path in, they're going to start with zero knowledge, or maybe they cut grass when they were a kid for their parents, did their own lawn, or whatever the case is. They have very minimal knowledge from a horticultural perspective. And what they're going to learn is minimal, and they will learn something when they start working, but they will learn by making mistakes. They'll learn by hurting customers' properties. They'll probably, hopefully, they'll listen to my podcast. They'll learn some skills from listening to me. They'll learn that they can go and find places where they can do some official training, and they will also learn some business skills that will help them. I think the best case for those scenarios is they'll find a place like LMCA where they can actually ask a group collective of people, and usually LMCA is not without its downfalls, but usually they will find somebody who is willing to give them enough information that they can improve their outlook and learn something useful.
Yes. Cautiously reserved. I think it's the new modern platforms that we have for communicating as an industry are great. By the same token, two people that don't know anything about the same subject are just as good as one person who doesn't. So as long as you can differentiate good advice from advice, it leads to success. You never know what you don't know, but and asking the question is never a bad thing. But if you're going in there to justify your thoughts and not expand knowledge, it can be a dangerous thing.
Yeah. Well, I've seen countless times LMCA, or the Professional Lawn Mowing Contractors Group for Australia. They both are fairly big platforms. But numerous times in either of those groups, I have seen somebody who is genuinely asking a question because they do not know. There's obviously a lot of variabilities there, but I word it that way. They genuinely ask, they do not know the answer. And on occasion, I've had the opportunity to have a phone call or a chat with that person online, and they are literally very confused because there's so many people taking the mickey out of them because they don't know. And they're like, well, who do I trust? Who's actually telling me the truth here? And they can't read between the lines and understand that. Now, you or I will probably look at that commentary and go, okay, there's one or two people there that should be considered group experts, and they should stand out as, like, for you or I, they do stand out. It's like very clear, okay, if I see Brodie answering there, I know he's got an experience behind him that he knows what he's talking about. But not everyone can see that.
Look, there's some days you feel like you do want to help people, and that's the whole goal of being a member of these platforms. I mean, I was a member of the original
independent mowing contractors,
which went on the other day, and it's still actually kicking along with the 3 or 4 people that don't know that Facebook exists.
Well, but they do actually have a Facebook page as well now.
So there you go. But you can try and help people, but if they don't understand that it's coming from good place, as you say, there's a lot of negativity on there. There's a lot of, well, you should know that, you're a contractor, and I'm guilty of that. I look at questions and think, you're giving this as a professional service. Why do you not know? It's concerning, and I come from the customer's point of view. You're asking the customer to pay, good money for a service that you're now tendering out to, an Australian-based contractors group to give you the answer to how to do it. I, from a customer point of view, I struggle with that. It's if you don't know how to do it, I come back to it. If you don't know how to do it, put your hand up and say, I don't know how to do it. I've got a resource that I can go to. I'll see if I can find a contractor that's done it before. Engage the contractor, work with them, learn on site. If you haven't done the apprenticeship or the learning in a way that, through a TAFE or something like that, where you've been able to get the learning, then getting another contractor on site who's done something in that field and is the expert in the field for, that's not a bad way to learn.
Yeah.
And I think we just need to sort of suck up our pride a bit and go, well, I don't know how to do it, but I'm going to find somebody who does and learn from that.
Well, look, I'll be a little bit controversial here, and I think you'll set me straight, no doubt. But I've come into this industry without the qualifications, although I've had a wealth of experience before I actually started in the industry in terms of growing up on acreage, looking after gardens, vegetable gardens and fruit trees and things like that. So I have had a background where I had a reasonable understanding of all of these things beforehand. So from that background, I've looked at the qualifications that you can attain and going, okay, are they actually worthwhile? And I have asked the question numerous times, do you need to be licensed to spray Roundup or other chemicals in this field of expertise? And the answer is no, you don't need to be licensed. But the deeper answer is you do actually need to be trained to use them correctly. And the ChemCert training is not a license. It is a training qualification to say you have been trained to do it correctly. Whether you do it correctly or not is another thing. And it does vary state by state as to whether you need to hold a license or whether you just need to have the ChemCert certificate to say you've done the training in that field of expertise. And I have often said, you don't even need to do the ChemCert if you're spraying less than 5 litres of concentrate in one day or 20 litres of mixed product in one day. Having said that, and you'll set me straight there, right? It is so easy for you to stuff up. And if you've done 19 litres instead of 20 litres, you're still stuffed up and you're going to be held accountable.
Well, I'd start with, if you're spraying 20 litres of chemical, have you accounted for that in your spray journal? The spray journal that you don't actually realise you need to keep when you're spraying because you didn't go and do the qualification, which would tell you that you're under or over 20 litres a day or week, whatever it is. There's a gap. Look, any homeowner can go out and spray whatever they want on whatever they want. As I said to you before, we work in retirement villages. There are a lot of bored people there that don't like seeing weeds. So inevitably, I get a lot of burnt patches in lawns because clients don't realise that there's a difference between Roundup and a selective herbicide. So they go to Bunnings and they go, well, that'll kill it. They take it out, they spray it, and then 2 weeks later I get a call, my lawn's dead. Well, we sprayed the wrong thing. What did you spray? Yep, definitely the wrong thing. That's Roundup. That's a non-selective herbicide. As contractors, we're not infallible. We can make the same mistakes. Now, there's a general understanding. If you want to knock out weed or grass or something, you go and get Roundup. If you want to do clover, the question comes up on LMCA nearly weekly. What should I use? Now, there's a range of products. You could use the newer style chemicals of bow and arrow, or you can use dicamba plus MCPA. I know which one I'm choosing, just from a personal health and safety and general nastiness to use. And I'm more than likely going to go with the bow and arrow.
I've still got bromoxynil and MCPA sitting in my shed. Yeah,
it's not nice stuff to use. If you actually read the label, the amount of PPE that you need to put on just to mix the thing is worrying. You've got eye damage, you've got lung damage, skin damage if you're not wearing the right PPE. And my concern is, as an industry, we know, okay, well, that's the chemical that we use. But if you don't know or can't be bothered to read the label, and a lot of people don't, because a lot of people ask the mixing ratios, you've got to wonder, did you ever read the safety label either? Have you read the MSDS sheet? And, there's probably still a few people who are asking, what's an MSDS sheet?
Material safety data sheet.
Correct. It doesn't necessarily come with the package. Sometimes you've got to go and find it. It's a very important document, one that is instilled into you ad nauseum when you go and do the training. So back to your original question, should I be trained? Yes. Licensing is a different issue. We're licensed because we spray broadacre chemical. So we spray, 500 to 600 litres at a time. So we are New South Wales
agricultural license.
Agricultural license for chemical spraying. That is something that we need to maintain. The way that we maintain that is to have a qualification, which is a ChemCert certificate or a like. ChemCert happen to be the biggest. Are they the best? That's debatable, but, a chemical license with a chemical license number, chemical qualification with a chemical qualification number will put you in good stead to understanding not only how to use the chemical, how to find the information about the chemical, how to use it, how to protect yourself, how to transport it. All very important things. I'm sure there's a lot of utes out there that have chemicals sitting next to petrol or sitting next to lithium batteries, which is arguably worse. That don't realise that that's actually a hazard, and in some places highly illegal. I
heard somebody talking about this recently, and their comment was most of you are not going to be carrying enough chemical in one go that it's actually a problem.
Possibly not, but I wouldn't like to find out that if it is a problem after the fact.
No.
A ChemCert course or alike will give you the understanding of what those thresholds are. For some of the bigger contractors out there, they may buy chemical in bulk. They need to understand their transport requirements. Sometimes there's actually an insurance implication depending on how much chemical you're transporting.
Yep. A lot of us are going to buy between 5 and 20 litre containers of chemical concentrate.
And you'll probably be all right.
Some of us, probably you, are going to buy 44 gallons at a time.
Yeah. I mean, some of our organics that we spray, we buy in 1,000-litre shuttles. So they still have a MSDS and transport requirements for organic compound. And this comes not into use, not into storage, not into transport. But should there be an accident where the vehicle rolls over and the chemical or organic matter is released into the environment, what are the ramifications for that?
And what's the spill catch requirements?
What's the spill catchment requirements when hazmat gets there or the fireys get there? What do you need to tell them? Not only for your safety, but for their safety. If they, if the vehicle's caught on fire and there's chemical everywhere, they need to know what they're dealing with and how to treat it. I know the question started with, do I need a qualification to spray? But the spraying is the minute part at the end where we get paid. It's everything that leads up to that that's important for us to know. And that's
I guess the reason I brought that one up, and it is a controversial one, but the reason I brought that one up is because there is a clear path as to what should be done. And for the average person who has started from a no qualification point of view, just making long grass short, initially they won't need it because they're not doing any spraying. All they're doing is cutting grass. But sooner or later, one of their customers is going to say, hey, I've got army grubs, or hey, I've got clover everywhere, or can you spray glyphosate? You got to try and say it correctly. A lot of people say glyphosate. Can you spray glyphosate just to kill the grass along the fence line, or whatever it is? Yeah. You're going to get asked those questions, and if you don't know any better, haven't done any training, then you probably don't know that there are requirements around what you can and can't do.
Correct. And you're probably also going to look a little silly if the client's coming out and saying, I've got army grub, can you treat it? I'd much rather be the contractor that walks up to the client and says, you've got army grub, would you like me to treat it? And the client goes, yeah, that'd be good. Or what's army grub?
Well, you're sounding like a horticulturist rather than a cowboy there. So
I'm sounding like the person who wants to do the best for our clients. I think.
Excuse my dog; it's going off.
No, that's all right. I think that if we're going to provide a professional service, then we owe it to the client to be a professional service. You can come in, cut grass, make it long grass short. What variety of grass are you cutting? Because there's several contractors that have come to me and said, oh, how high should I cut this? And I said, well, what are you cutting? I don't know. Yeah. Buffalo, you can get away with scalping it once or twice. Yeah. Keep doing it, it's going to look like crap.
Yeah.
You can do whatever you want with it. You can spray glyphosate on it weekly, and it'll still keep coming back. But
I guess this is going to change people, right? Once they start working in the industry, they're going to have some level of interest in understanding the horticultural issues that they're dealing with. And it's not just making long grass short. So there are a bunch of things that come into it. They're probably going to get asked to do some gardening, not just cutting grass. Now, if you have your training coming in from an arborist point of view, coming in with a horticultural understanding, it's a massive difference to somebody who comes in with zero training. And I guess this goes back to, do you just learn a few things ad hoc as you go along, or do you become more advanced? Do you actually seek out a certification, go to TAFE, do another form of training and get certified to say that you have an basic understanding of plant names, of the different types of plants that work well in different areas, the different requirements of those plants, and start to understand these things like what types of grass do different things? If you don't have any interest in that, you can still work in our industry. But there are some things that you need to understand so that you can actually work successfully.
Yeah, look, I don't necessarily think that a full TAFE qualification is necessary. If all you're doing is making long grass short, occasionally spraying some weeds, doing some basic pruning and some hedges, then a TAFE qualification is an absolutely redundant waste of time, because you're never going to engage properly and understand to the level that they want to teach you. TAFE want to teach you broad spectrum ideas to a somewhat scientific level, depending on what level you're training at.
Hey friends, I'm just eating my lunch at the moment, but wanted to give you the heads up. We've got a brand new deal between Catch Pro and Aussie Lawn Stars. If you purchase on catchpro.com.au now, you can get 10% off your product purchases by using the code LawnStars10. So jump on it, save yourself 10%. Just keep in mind this doesn't work with bad workwear, GA spares or Segway. Thanks.
My hope for the industry is that there's someone out there who's smart and aggressive and able to put through a short course, 6 months. You want to leave your accountancy job, you want to work outside. In these 6 months, before you leave, you go and do a night course on basic horticultural principles, not even going into the minutiae of horticulture, but giving you an avenue of where to look and where to find information. How do I identify a plant? How do I identify a pest? What am I looking at when I look at a lawn and say, well, there's brown spot there? Is that from a fungal attack? Is that from an insect attack? Is that because, that area is drying out for some reason? Those avenues to figure it out for yourself and the fundamentals that you need to figure that out could well be invaluable and bring the industry up a professional level. I don't think it needs to be in depth.
I think if you look at the options available at the moment, you've got the arborist's background, which is predominantly looking at trees. You've got the horticulture background, which is a fairly deep dive into all things plant related. Or you've got sports turf for those who are obsessed over making short grass look spectacular. Then you've got parks and gardens for those people who want to have a bit of everything. But they all are at that level of going, you're trade qualified essentially at some level with those things.
Essentially.
And like you're saying, a 6 month certification would make a lot of sense to get somebody across the line. And I think, shout out to Jim's Mowing. If you go and join Jim's Mowing, you're going to do a 6-day training, which may or may not give you a lot of information. It should give you something, and I did hear recently that it might actually give you ChemCert. I'm not convinced that it gives you ChemCert, but if they could at least run you through a ChemCert and some basic horticulture principles in that 6 days, as well as obviously they're going to focus a bit on business principles in that time as well, so that dilutes the horticulture background of it. Yeah,
look, I've never done a GYMS training, obviously, but
but
I think it's more business related, as well it should be. We've touched on horticultural training, but as you've discussed many a time, business training is just as important. You can go and cut as much grass, short as you want. If you don't understand how to run a business, that's a big problem too.
Yeah, for sure. And I think both are equally needed because sooner or later your customers will wonder whether you know how to price something properly because they'll go, oh, he was here for 15 minutes and he charged me $200. But likewise, they will say he was here for 15 minutes and he didn't recognise that the grass has turned brown and that's full of army grubs and he didn't even mention it.
Yes. Both are equally as important. And I guess that's where I come back to maybe working with somebody. If this is the industry you want to be in, I know for a fact that I'm desperate for staff. So if you want to leave your 9-to-5 office job and want to give it a good crack, we're happy to have you and train you and do all those wonderful things.
Brodie's in Sydney if anyone's listening to this and looking for a job.
Yeah, and a licence, please.
Yes, more than just a learner licence.
No applicant seems to come with a driver's licence anymore. It's a thing of the past. Evidently, young people don't like driving. But
Look, the interview I've just published, I talked to Cam, and he's from Abcam Horticulture. Talked to him extensively about this. Hiring for people that have some skill level already is critical. He has an employee that is able to run a vehicle and employees without him. Now, if he was minus that employee, then every employee he has is going to be requiring him to feed the whippersnipper cord, him to mix the spray, him to hold their hand, wipe their bum, put the dummy back in their mouth and smack them and burp them and everything, right? So having another employee there that is able to do the work without him is incredibly valuable. And I think that's where we need to be looking at when we go down that path of, business skills instead of the horticulture skills, is going, okay, hiring for somebody who actually is already capable of doing what I need them to do is really critical. And we seem to miss that a lot of the time, don't we? And we go, like you say, the bare minimum, do they at least have their license?
we do hire at whim, and unfortunately, this industry changes so quickly. So one day you're searching for work and you don't have enough. The next day you've got a major contract that's starting in 4 weeks. So you find yourself without the time to go and employ the right person. Case in point, we got appointed a large contract. We did the interview, accepted the person. They said, yes, we know how to use all this equipment. Got them out on site, handed them a mower, and he said, what's this? And I said, that is your mower for the day. Oh, I said, you told me you knew how to use this. Well, I've used a plate compactor before in my previous job, and I just thought it was similar. I said, well, yeah, it goes forward and backwards. There'll be less vibration. You're going to have to run over more than the one spot for it to work though.
Don't spend too long on the one spot or you'll wreck it.
And we've taken a leaf out of Luke Smith's book for hiring, where we now do a basic interview. If you pass that, you can come and do a trial day, paid trial day, and it really weeds out a lot of people who just look at the equipment that we've got, and we don't have special equipment. We've just got the standard mowing equipment, and they still look at it and go, what is this? How do I use it? What do you it's unbelievable some days.
Well, I've just done an interview with Mike Andes from the US, and he's really good at the hiring process. He's super focused on growing businesses with multiple employees, so I found that an awesome interview. But his hiring process, if you go back through his podcast, look it up, and he focuses on going, all right, we're going to interview 1,000 people, or get 1,000 applicants, interview 100 of them. We're going to whittle it down from 1,000 to 100, down to about 2 or 3 people that actually turn up for the training day. And out of those 3 people that turn up for the training day, one of them's going to come back the next day and do a training week.
We've done the CCAD.
Yep.
It pulled an interesting variety of people. Most people were, doing their 30-day check-in with their Centrelink caseworker to say that they'd gone for an interview. And that's the unfortunate. COVID did a lot of damage to employing people in this country, especially in lower barrier to entry jobs, like we provide. There was a point where people realised, if I sit at home and do nothing, the government will pay for me to do so. There's a lot of people that didn't go back into the workforce after COVID, or certainly not properly, because they realised that they could get benefits that outweighed
employment,
and they didn't have to sit in the hot sun and sweat and be uncomfortable. the good news is that you weed out the chaff and you get the people who actually want to be there, but they're few and far between.
Yeah, I think this is why it's good to have not just the CCAD, but also the list of minimum requirements there. So you can go, okay, we're not after somebody who their best feature is they have their license and they can turn up Monday to Friday. We're after somebody with a little bit more background than that, or somebody who's willing to do parks and gardens while they're doing their job. Work with me 4 days a week, 1 day a week, you're in TAFE.
Yeah. Oh, look, applicants that stay with us go through training, and we'll happily pay for training if we can see a path forward for them. My famous interview line is that you can have any job within this business except for mine, and you don't want mine because it's expensive. So we don't restrict. It's a big headache, but we don't restrict people that we employ. We give them every opportunity to thrive. It's theirs to lose, and without a doubt, ultimately we've got our core staff that we retain, but I know that 4 out of 5 that we employ aren't going to be there within 6 months because it's too hard, or they didn't realise that we worked past 12 o'clock.
I thought that was only a self-employed game. You work in the morning and then drink the money in the afternoon, right?
Look, it works for some of us. I don't know. Paul Luck is I'm led to believe is one of those people who gets to go home at 12 o'clock and has a very full day and a thriving business. It doesn't work for us, but if it works for him,
Paul needs to come and join me so he can prove that.
Well, yeah, I'd like to see how it's done, but I'll take him at his word until that. So
yeah, that would be an interesting interview. I have asked him.
Money where your mouth is.
I've got his phone number, so I might give him a call after this. So come and defend yourself, Paul.
Well, yeah. Look, there are so many ways of running a business that we run. You can have multiple teams, multiple people. You can have, sort of large sites that you dedicate yourself to, or you can have those really tight runs and everything in between, which is quite honestly the excitement of the industry. It's, I had an employee the other day say, would you come to work if you, got paid, essentially a government wage for the rest of your life and you didn't have to work? I said, no, I'd still come to work because I actually enjoy my job. I don't enjoy managing people who don't want to be here, but for the most part, enjoy my job.
You're a rare breed, Brodie.
Oh, you enjoy going to work, Garry, I'm sure.
Well, it seems like you say, like after COVID, everybody wants to stay home and watch Netflix and chill.
Yeah, look, I don't have the mind for it. I'd be incredibly bored if I sat at home doing nothing all day. I'd find something to do, to the point where we, my wife and I collect business ideas and no doubt start something in a different avenue. I mean, the weekend past we spent milling timber, so,
nice.
Completely separate business, but
I'll have a chat to you after because I was talking to my brother down in Tassie. He's been milling timber down there. And I was like, hey, Dale, can you send me some timber from Tassie? But maybe I should be talking to Brodie and getting some.
Well, if you can still get some of that Tassie oak, then I'd get into it because that's now not coming on shore as much as it was. So.
Most of what he mills is actually pine, and it's not radiata. I can't remember what the other pine is that they deal with down there, but he's dealing with a lot of pine.
Yeah.
They make fences out of it, and they make a lot of them.
Yeah, I wouldn't hazard to guess what they do down there. They're a different breed, so I've not been down there. I'm not familiar with what pine species they've got. So
yeah, well, shout out to Dale. He will call me when he hears this and set me straight.
Oh, if you can let me know. But look, it's what business is exciting, and I encourage everybody to, if they've got the drive and passion for it, to go for it. But my passion is education and making sure that people know what they're doing if that's what they're doing.
Yeah, fair enough. So come back to that timber mill for a second. What mill are you using?
We use the Lucas mill.
Okay, same as my brother. There are a couple of different options within the Lucas mills, but they're an interesting setup. When I was in Tassie in July, I did a little bit of work with him on his, and he's got a big circular blade for milling, and then he's got a chainsaw attachment as well, so he can slab if he wants to slab.
Yeah, so he went down. Yeah, so I went down the expensive route because, so we've got the 1030, which is the larger contracting swing blade saw. And we went with the dedicated slabber, which will let me get a 1.9 metre wide slab off the tree. And they're an impressive thing to pull off the mill. But
it looks very similar to what he's got. I'm just looking at the 1030. I reckon it's probably similar.
Yeah, look, the only difference is the blade size. And depending on what model he's got, possibly the width of the rails.
Yeah, well, I'm looking at the 1030 at the moment, and it looks similar size to what he's working with. So I think with the circular blade, I think off the top of my head, I'm not sure if it's 200 or 300 he can cut with it. Do you know what the 1030 does?
I believe it's 300. Yeah, it's 300.
The 30 probably is what that number represents, right?
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
If we do a bit of technical work and swing the mill around, we can get a 600 cut with that blade, which is some pretty impressive timber.
Yep, it sure is. Yeah, so what's the type of timber you're mostly cutting?
We do a lot of redwood, a lot of ironbark.
The really hard stuff then.
Yeah. We got a fairly sizable contract for us to do a private forestry. So we logged all that up a hill, much to my displeasure.
That's hard work.
It is hard work. And we milled all that on site and sent it off to a kiln for drying. And that got used to build their house.
Nice.
So my wife, Jen, she's a structural timber grader for softwood. I'm structural grader for hardwood.
Yeah, nice.
So any of the timber that we produce off the mill, we can now structurally grade. So incredibly beneficial for that customer because we could log mill, dry, and certify that timber for construction.
So when you're talking timber like that, you're often building a house where you're doing large spans and you're going, if the timber is the right size and it's certified, you can do a 6 metre span or a bigger 10 metre span with some timber.
Correct.
And it looks fantastic.
So it does look fantastic. We can visually grade the timber. If you do want to do large spans like that, it comes into a engineered grade timber, so it does need to be engineered. That's the only difference, but we can still do structural 2x4s, all that sort of stuff. I can do a 600 by 600 beam and put it into a house. It's just that it wants engineering before it takes the load.
Yes.
But it does look fantastic.
Yeah. But 600 by 600 is massive, just saying. Like, if you look at a lot of modern houses, you'll see a couple of posts that are 200 by 200, maybe a cross beam at 200 by 200.
Yeah. I look, our sweet spot is the 200 by 200 post. Finding timber that's big enough to pull more than one of those out is the trick and the key. So
yes.
It's not easy, especially now that they've closed a lot of forestry.
They certainly have. I know a friend was moving up North Coast, New South Wales, and they've got a big koala corridor they were just implementing as he was taking the job up there.
Yeah. It's not, difference of opinion, but I don't necessarily think it's a great idea just to cut and dry close down forestry. I don't think any state government understands what forestry as a business does for the local environment. Yes, they take out trees. They do so very selectively and under very strict guidelines. But for what they put back and the management that they put in, even just for fire mitigation, is quite substantial. And if you're worried about loggers going in there and selectively taking out trees, bushfires don't. And in most instances where they've stopped logging, National Parks has taken over. They don't have the resources to manage it. Large bushfire goes through and everything's gone, including that koala that they were trying to save.
Well, a lot of what I've seen, Brodie, and no hiding where I am, Central Coast, Newcastle area, the Wadigan Mountains has been my playground all of my life. I have been up there four-wheel driving, motorbike riding and mountain biking through all of the trails through there. They have not selectively taken timber out of there. They have decimated hectares and hectares of land. They just go in and they clear a massive section, wipe everything out and take the good logs. And so I can understand why there's pushback when it comes to that side of it. And it doesn't need to be done that way.
there, don't get me wrong, there is that side of logging. It's usually designated logging space, but that's the trade-off we make as humans wanting to live in a natural environment and build houses out of timber. It comes from somewhere. The trade-off we make is that here's 40 hectares of ground that we're going to put a radiata pine plantation in, or a hardwood pine plantation in. We manage it for 20, 30 years, sometimes longer, and then at the end of that period, we cut it all down. Is it responsible? I don't know. Not for me to decide. But we've got to get the timber from somewhere. So that's where we get it from.
Yeah, that's it. And like you say, there's different ways of doing it that can be well managed and that can attract the wrong kind of attention.
Yeah. Oh, look, I guess that's why we started milling as a side project. We, as a tree business, we take down hundreds of trees a year, and it either goes to landfill or we can use it. So we've gone the avenue of using it. We bring it back to our yard and we mill it into usable timber. What we can't mill into usable timber, we put into our biochar process. Our biochar feeds our kiln to heat that and dry timber, for use and then goes into our composting system. So we've got a large amount of green waste that we bring back from client property. None of that goes to the tip. That all goes into our composting systems. And we use the wood waste from the mill, as I said, biochar, as an additive to bind in those nutrients that we started off talking about this afternoon into the soil. So, we get paid to make our own soil. We then charge the client to take it all back, inevitably. So we try and be as circular as we can with our waste.
That's fantastic.
And really close that loop. It was your interview a couple of weeks back with the biobanking conversations. Quite interesting to us, and quite surprising that none of what we do is actually considered. We'd have to get bio credits for everything that we do, regardless of the fact that we use it all in that circular system. But it doesn't go to any green credits. We'd still need to buy them back. So
yeah, that's an interesting one, isn't it? And I guess at the end of the day, like, as much as we're talking about having a good understanding, doing certification training and making sure you're very aware of what you can and can't do in this industry, when it comes to government regulations and certifications for things like that, it gets really difficult. And often it's a case of going, well, am I putting enough money in the right pocket to get what I want out of this? After inviting Sortscape in to share how their software can help your business, we created a link for you to be able to support Aussie Lawn Stars when you join. Sortscape will save you time and effort with scheduling, quoting and reporting so you can build a more efficient business. Visit sortscape.com/lawnstars now to join, and thank you for your support.
Yeah, look, we go for tenders every now and then. They want to hear all the good stuff that we do and how we're going to, change the world. A lot of it's just lip service, unfortunately. When you actually get out on site and you're doing the job, cost is always the biggest driver. And if the cheaper way isn't necessarily the green way, and people who are overseeing projects can sort of look sideways, they'll inevitably do it. It's if they can save money by us providing a cheaper service by doing it not the way described in our tender document, then they will take that option if they have the choice. It then comes back to us as contractors to say, well, this is how we said we'd do it. We should be doing it that way.
I guess this is where like a lot of people in our industry are never going to understand or never put a tender in, right? But this is where it gets a little bit disheartening. If you look at the requirements that you need to fulfill in a tender, and you go to the effort of, let's say you spend a day, and on a more detailed one, you might spend a full week preparing your tender. If you spend one day doing it, 8 hours, 12 hours worth of work you've invested in that. And I think I've seen something that actually recommended you shouldn't spend more than about 12 hours on one tender. Who knows, right? But if you say it's a more detailed one, you spend a week working on it and preparing all of the things you need to meet the requirements for that tender, and somebody else is a little bit lax on the requirements, but their price is cheaper than yours.
Yeah, look, we're finding these days it's not necessarily coming down to price. It ultimately does to a point, but they also want all these other things that go around it. What sort of people are you employing? Are they, what percent? The number one question that infuriates me is how much of percentage of your workforce is female? What percentage of your workforce is Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander? These are the sorts of questions that we're being asked. They're an annoying question not because I don't agree with them. They're an annoying question because we employ people who want to work with us. We employ people who are right for the job. If that happens to be a female, we're more than happy to employ a female. If that happens to be an Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander person, that's fine. But the way that the government tendering system works and asks the question, it's almost like we want you to go out and find these people and employ them just for the sake of employing them, not because they're the right person for the job. And it's incredibly frustrating to, not have that tokenistic person in there just for the sake of it, rather than having the right good people there.
Yeah, and in some places around Australia, often those requirements are about filling a number rather than actually going, is this the best person for the job? So often nowadays you can find that you can get a contract, you can win a tender. If you have somebody else do the tender and then you subcontract to them because that other person says, yep, we are taking X amount of money and putting it into whatever, carbon tax or to meet this requirement, then they sub it out to you.
Yeah. Look, it's a way to go. We've done the tier 1 contracting thing. Wasn't as much fun as you'd think it is. During the last bushfires, where the government decided we're going to put this team of people together and they're going to clean up all your properties for you, somehow we made it onto the list as a tier 1 contractor, unbeknownst to us, and we turned up on site and the contract organizer turned around and said, well, you're running this site and these are all the things that you've got to do, and here's your contractors for asbestos, and here's your contractors for earth moving, and here's your contractors for this. Hang on a second. He said, you're the tier 1 contractor for the area. There you go. Go and do that. Which was an interesting one to stand up and run a whole heap of subcontractors that we'd never really done before. An interesting experience to have, but not one I'd readily take on again.
I guess we're diving down rabbit hole after rabbit hole here. We're sort of going through a bit of a rabbit warren in terms of the different topics that are coming up. But this is very interesting for people who are going from the shallow end of the market, the 3 tools and the hatchback, through to what you can do in this industry. And often you will find, like you or myself, will find that the opportunities that open up in this industry because you've persisted, you've got everything behind you, you've got the capacity, you've got the training, you've got the insurance, you've got everything there. It will take you places where you start going, hang on a minute, I'm feeling a little bit out of my depth here, or I don't see a profitable business model in this particular avenue. And so I've chosen not to participate in things because of that. I've actually attempted to pursue a contract with State Rail, and I didn't follow it very far. I was like, no, that rabbit hole's not for me. But
State Rail is an interesting one because it just came up as a tender again not long ago, and we looked at it, and I thought, well, we can technically, yes, we can do this. Should we? No. There's no benefit for us doing it. Yes, we can do it. Yes, we can throw the guys at it. Yes, we could probably make some money, but it takes a lot of focus away from what we're currently doing, a lot of resources away from what we're currently doing, and it gets to a point, and I'm always cautious when I see people, in a forum saying, I'd like to grow, I'd like to get employees, I want to move into commercial work, I want to, grow my business and do this. I always caution, take a minute, take a step back, because there's a point where you are throwing, darts at a wall and seeing which one sticks.
Yeah.
I'm not guilty of that myself. I've, been doing this for 18 years.
Yeah.
And, there have been years where I've just gone, we're going to do this, and take on everything in the world. And ultimately, it ends up in failure.
Like my excavator.
Well, yeah, like your excavator. We've got a large collection of gear that, unlike your excavator, I'm reluctant to sell.
Yep, fair enough.
Because I have somewhat of an addiction to collecting equipment. But
you need a bigger shed than me, then.
I need a much bigger shed. I need a bigger shed than I've got. But the addiction carries on. Unfortunately, it means that when these things come up, I can sort of say, yeah, we'll throw our hat into the ring. But unless we've got the staff to manage it, we either fail at the task or we fail at something that we're already doing well. And I think that's the danger for all small businesses, is that you can overcapitalise, not just in equipment, but overcapitalise in tasks that you're doing,
Yes.
and overwhelm yourself really quickly. You hear success stories like Mike Handy's, where he, builds all these teams and he puts them all together, and franchise after franchise, and it all works really well. And you will hear it from Mike, because he's quite an honest guy, but
Yeah.
there were a lot of failures getting to that point. We've built systems around our failures to protect us from our failures.
His key phrase that I took from his hour interview that I did with him: simplify and systemize. So whatever it is you're doing, you want to make it as simple as possible, and you want to systematize it.
And I tend to agree. A couple of years ago, we were running a very complex business, with multiple crews, multiple avenues of work, and we were constantly chasing our tails. We've now simplified it to, we only do tree work for a customer that we already have. And it's that simple. If we go out and do tree work in the normal sense of a tree business, we're constantly chasing our tails looking for work. It's a constant marketing play. It's expensive. You're constantly looking for something, the next tree, the next project, the next something. And it's incredibly expensive marketing exercise. Just
when
to
you're
find
chasing one-off work, then the amount of dollars that you put into getting one-off job, it's very quickly changing. It's completely different to where you've got a customer for life that you're going, all right, I'm servicing them 20, 30, 40 times a year. When you're going, I'm getting one service out of them, and I've spent how much chasing that?
True. And the model that we've adopted now is, you're a lawn and garden client, you get a weed and feed service, and you get the opportunity to be on our tree service. Now, we may well take out a tree for you, and that's the end of that tree. Or we may well look at ways and avenues that we can manage that tree on your property to serve you the way that it should. The amount of times I've had a client come out to me and say, oh, the tree just died. Trees don't generally just die unless they're struck by lightning. It's been dying for 3, 5, 10 years and you just haven't noticed it because you walk out every day, you go, oh, the tree's still there. Looks about as green as it was yesterday and get on with life. It's only when it starts dropping limbs and looks brown and horrible that we usually get a call as arborists to say, oh, our tree's dying. Generally, it's too late. So having that relationship with our customers, we're now able to provide better servicing for those larger assets.
Makes a lot of sense. It's kind of like employees. If you don't check in with your employees very often and wait until they display a red flag, it's often see you later because the red flag is too late to fix the problem. Whereas if you keep on top of them, you work with them and you keep communicating, then you know where they're at and what they need and keep them happy.
Yeah, look, we have new staff members start 3 weeks ago now. Every day, 3 times a day, I will ask him, are you all right? Are you comfortable? Are you settling in? Is there anything you need to know? And I warned him on his first day. I said, this is going to go on for months where I'm going to religiously ask you, how are you doing? And the point of it isn't to annoy the living hell out of you. It's to make sure that you're not struggling. We make sure that we find issues quickly. We can rectify them quickly. We're changing behaviours before they become ingrained. And that's,
I guess, Brodie, I think this is one of those topics I always like to talk about, but you've got experience I don't have. So fill in the blanks for me. Take over the conversation and tell me what you think. But in terms of somebody starting a business, majority of people in our industry are going to start out replacing a job with a job. So they go, oh, I don't like working for the accountant. I'm going to start cutting grass. And that's a job that they've bought. They might have bought a lawn mowing run, or they might have bought a Jim's mowing franchise, or whatever they've done, but they've essentially just bought themselves a job. At some stage, their entrepreneurial fart or their green eyes will say, I can rule the world in this industry. And that's where we make mistakes. If we've come in from accounting and we don't have the skills to understand every aspect of the business, and we don't follow Mike Andy's principle of keep it simple, stupid, and focus on systems, we often just start going, oh, I could put on some employees. I could go doing arborist work. I could go tendering for the government. I could go and do X, Y, Z. I can do stump grinding as well as lawn mowing, as well as gardening, as well as building and landscape construction and everything. So what I'm getting at, if the average person comes into this industry and they've gone, yep, I've made myself a job, that doesn't mean they are cut out for doing all of those other things, even though they might try it. And often they will attempt and then they'll throw it in the bin and go, that didn't work, and they'll go back to just being self-employed. So one of the things I think is absolutely critical there to make those systems work well, of course, like Mike Andy says, simplify everything. So you're not taking on things that are making your business too complex. But I believe it's absolutely critical to know that each component of your business is profitable. Very simple. Got expenses, and that includes wages as well as insurance, overheads, whatever all those bits and pieces that make up your expenses look like. And after all expenses are sorted out, you want to know that you have somewhere around a 30% profit margin. And I know we can work off 10%, 20% profit margin, but a 30% profit margin for a small business in our industry is what we should be going at. Are we hitting that? And if we're less than it, are we doing it just because we love it? Because it's not actually great if it's less than that. Throwing that back into your court though, Brodie, how does that look? Are you looking at your business going, yeah, we love what we do. We've kept it simple, and everything we do is hugely profitable. Or more to the point, you can deliver something for the listeners in terms of recommending what they should be doing there to make sure they get that right.
Our business is, and the way I look at the business is a little bit different to, I guess you'd look at it as most people look at it. and I'll start this off as our fundamentals is I'm building a business for my next generation. So my son,
Yeah.
my aim is to hand it over to him.
He's 4 years old, right?
He's 4 years old. That plan may well change. He is suffering from autism with global delays, and he currently has no vocabulary or very little. So he may well develop into the person that he should be, or he may well be stuck where he is.
He may be dependent on you for a long time yet.
He may well have dependencies on me for the rest of my life, and he may need support for the rest of his. So the way I look at our business is such that it needs to provide for him whether or not he can take over the business or whether or not he is a beneficiary of the business. And somebody else is in the business managing it for him. So that's how we look at it. So decisions that I make now, financially, they're important, but they're not as consequential. I can invest money differently because I've got a long-term goal that surpasses, my retirement.
Yeah.
Having said that, we still need to be profitable.
Yeah. That's the point I'm getting to, yeah.
So, to answer your question, we look at generally about a 25 to 30% profit margin, depending on what services we're doing. We do offer a commercial service in bulk. So with commercial clients that take up a large portion of our time, they do inevitably dictate that they would like a slight discount for that work. So I don't get the margin and pricing that I would get from a residential run that could be priced a lot higher.
On that note, if you do a large site working one place all the time, you got a couple of employees working on that site, you can charge that client at $80 to $100 an hour and be as profitable there as if you're charging residential jobs out at $150 an hour. So there are variables there like travel time and unbillable hours, downtime that you don't get when you're doing large jobs, whereas residential jobs you have inherently built in.
There are, and you are correct. We do make a decent profit margin off those larger commercial clients. It's just knowing how to staff and scale them appropriately, how much time to spend on site is going to dictate how that all happens. People often get concerned when we throw out a number that seems low. It's not low when you consider that you're on site, you've got very little expenses. We run battery equipment, so the majority of our fuel is paid up front. It's and amortized over 5 to 10 years. Depending on the systems that we're running. So costs for those larger sites are incredibly low. Our biggest expense is employees. And, as long as that's covered. So we still run on that's what I say, we run on a fairly decent margin. My advice for people getting into the industry would be keep services simple. It's just that simple. If you want to eventually grow to doing trees and spraying and all the other stuff, nail the nail mowing. Mow the lawn properly. Offer a fertilizer and weed package on the side, but don't overcapitalize. Don't.
Yeah, fair enough.
Don't work over your means. When
That
we
is so easy to
started,
do.
yeah, look, when we started out, I started off pushing acre lawns with a 19-inch Rover push mower. In the middle of summer, that sucked. It took me, a couple of years to buy my first zero turn. But we had the dedication to getting the service right with the push mower, and being able to afford. So the first zero turn that we bought with cash. We didn't take out a loan. We didn't overextend ourselves. We made sure that we knew what we were doing before we put in layers and layers of complexity. And those layers are owing people money. Owing people money sucks. And it's a massive drain on your mental stress. It's mental stress you don't need when you're starting up. If I could, then I'd almost go back to pushing residential lawns with a 19-inch Rover mower. Because
Brodie, I don't know if you can hear me, but I've lost you.
No.
I'm Garry Ashton, and I'm here to help business owners succeed and enjoy being in business. Does running your business feel chaotic? Maybe you started it for freedom, to live the life you wanted, but now you're stuck in the grind, overwhelmed and exhausted. The stress doesn't stop. You work harder, but nothing really changes. Get real support at Think Tank Coaching. Get crystal clear on future goals, your ideal customers, and the numbers to focus on that will move your business forward. If you're ready to make a change, let's talk. Book your free strategy session now at thinktankcoaching.com.
Yeah, we were talking about a lot of business skills and profit margins and making sure business was working well for you, and then my internet crashed. My apologies.
That is the way things happen with technology, unfortunately.
Yep.
Where I think we got up to was me talking about not taking on large amounts of debt too early on in the business. I think it may be wonderful to have a brand new trailer and a brand new mower and all sorts of things, but the beauty of this industry is it's a low barrier to entry industry, and that means that you can trial your market before you get to spend a whole heap of money. The amount of brand new ride-on mowers that you see advertised online, it tells me that somebody made a mistake.
Well, I guess that's the back and forth of the low barrier to entry, isn't it? Right? You can start with a less than $1,000 investment, but it is so easy to go, well, I've made $1,000 today, I'll go and spend $1,000, and then you're actually in the red because you've got expenses and you've spent all of the money that was there. So, and I've been guilty of making this mistake of going, there's money in the bank, I'll spend it. And once you start adopting a profit-first business model, you start putting money aside for reinvesting in the business and money for profit and money for different things. So that helps to prevent that. But it is very easy to overinvest buying a ride-on mower without actually proving that there's a business model for it. And there's, like you say, there's so many people, and I pick on the 32-inch stander market there because I like them, but it is very easy to buy one without testing the market first.
Yeah, look, I mean, in a lot of cases, a 32-inch stander is a wonderful thing. It'll get you through the majority of the backyard gates, and you'll be infinitely faster to do the jobs if it's a large property. Unfortunately, that also encourages you to take it through every gate that you possibly can, and it's not necessarily beneficial. If you've got a small backyard with lots of features in it, be it garden beds or water fountains or paths or anything like that, it'll actually slow you down quite significantly. If I had a 32-inch stander, I could take it into every one of the villas in the retirement village. Would it make me faster? No. I'd do 2 passes and have to try and turn the silly thing around, and we'd spend more time trying to get it in and out of backyards than we'd actually spend mowing and having productive time. So we do those all with 19 or 21-inch push mower. Yes, we do more walking and more passes, but I can tell you it's more efficient. Every day of the week it's more efficient.
I guess when it comes to mower size, there's a lot of pros and cons for different sizes and structures, right? So a lightweight mower you can pick up by hand and carry it upstairs has its place. If it's battery powered, it's probably even easier for you because you can store it vertically in your trailer, so it takes up minimal space everywhere.
Yeah.
But at some stage you go, okay, a 21-inch self-propelled mower is much more efficient to use than that lightweight 19-inch or 18-inch non-self-propelled mower. And then you go, okay, a 30-inch Toro Time Master is one of the most efficient walk-behind machines you can use, but it's not as light as your 18-inch battery-powered mower. It covers a lot more ground, but it's not always the best choice. So you do have to weigh up and go, okay, depending on the size of the yard, like you say, the obstacles and features in the yard, the size of the access point, and then the next factor is, okay, a 18-inch, 19-inch, 21-inch, 30-inch walk-behind mower has a fairly light footprint, but they also have fairly narrow wheels, so they still leave little divots where those wheels are on really soft ground when it's wet. So it means often you're not going to mow when you've had a lot of rain because it's just going to make a mess. Then you go to a ride-on or a stand-on mower, which has a pneumatic tire on it, so it actually does less damage sometimes. Other times it does more damage. And yeah, they might be quicker, but they're not quicker in every situation. So you got to weigh that up and go, okay, with a ride-on or a stand-on mower, you're probably going to use a side bagger catcher, whereas a walk-behind machine, you're going to use a rear catcher. And it's not always efficient to be putting a catcher on and off the side of the machine. And then there's the options of whether you're mulching or side discharging on some properties compared to catching the grass, and a whole range of things that can make a massive difference whether that is a viable business model. I tell people when they ask me what machine should I buy, I'm like, well, what customers have you already got and what can you use that's most efficient with those customers?
And I guess that's where I come down to machine choice, and it's the number one question we get asked by people wanting to stay in the industry. What machine should I buy? It comes down to personal preference, but it also comes down to your client base. And narrowing that down, and we talk about niching down into services that we offer, but we also need to think about niching down into the type of client properties that we have. If you do all new estates and they're 400 to 600 square metre block size with a oversized house on it, a 19-inch battery mower is quite profitable for you. It makes perfect sense. You need a mower, a whippersnipper and a blower, and you're making money all day, every day. If you then turn around and say, I want to do that, but I also want to do 1,000 square metre blocks, you start to need bigger equipment, and the amount of 1,000 square metre blocks are more rare than the 400 to 600 square metre blocks. So where's your time divided? And that's where I see a lot of businesses move from being incredibly profitable in a niche to not necessarily losing money, but also damaging that profit margin that you've got. it's fine to do the 1,000 square metre blocks, but probably makes more sense to specialise in 1,000 square metre blocks and know what equipment works best for that.
One of the things I see come up there, if you look at my area, there's a lot of 400 to 600 square metre blocks in there now that have only come in the last few years. So when I started mowing, the majority of properties were 1,000 to 2,000 square metres, and now the comparison is you could set up a business very quickly in that new subdivision where they're under 500 square metres for the most part, and it's a very particular business model you're chasing. In a new subdivision, there's a lot of people who are time poor and they're very happy to spend $80 to $100 getting their grass cut. If you go to the older subdivision where they're all over 1,000 square metres, most of those people are lower income or retirees, meaning that for 1,000 square metres, they still only want to spend $80 to get their grass cut, and you probably need a ride-on mower to make it efficient.
Yeah, and that's looking at your market, looking at how you price it and how... So looking at the market and saying, okay, those people can only afford $80 an hour, that's a viable market if you can figure out how to make $80 an hour profitable. In that if you've got a machine that'll do the 1,000 square metre block less the house, in half an hour, and at the half hour mark, 30 minutes, you're blowing down and hopping back in the car, that's very profitable. You get 2 or 3 of those in a street or more, and you're making some good coin.
Exactly.
Just the same as if you go into a dense area and charge the lower rates. You stack those properties up. You walk door to door. You park the car once, and you can make a decent living out of doing small blocks with a very minimal setup.
Yep.
And if you're talking about a battery setup for those smaller yards, there's no fuel expenses except to drive there, and some charging possibly throughout the day or at the end of the day. That's an incredibly good investment into gear. I mean, we run Ego gear for our mowing equipment. There are some good options there for contractors coming into the market to be able to start up sub $5,000 with a decent setup that most would consider a commercial setup. I mean, before Ego bought out the commercial line, we were using those tools commercially, and they stood up. So it's a very minimal investment to get into a market. The problem I see is when you want to split focus and then it suddenly becomes a not profitable business, you start looking at having to segment the market that's been profitable for you or employ somebody. And as we know, when we employ somebody, we can all but guarantee that profit margin's going to tank itself over a cliff, at least in the short term, until we figure it out.
Yep, I was listening to Joel from the Landscaping Podcast today talk about having an employee and pretty much expect your employee to work at half the pace you work.
You can expect them to work at half the pace you work, but you can also expect them to do some really dumb stuff.
Yeah.
When I was working solo, I didn't have equipment breakdown because I knew how to look after my equipment and I was using it every day. So when I noticed that it was getting low on, the whippersnipper head was getting low on grease, we put grease in it. The employee goes, "Oh, it's making a funny noise. I'll keep using it for a week and see if it just grinds itself back to being normal." there's a lot of unforeseen cost with employees that you never see. This year we took on our first workers' comp claim for a sprained ankle of all things, but it was, it ended up being 6 weeks of an employee off work for a sprained ankle. For a sprained ankle that could have just used an ice pack. He did everything right. We did everything we were meant to do on our end. It just so happened that he stepped on a rotted board in a client's property and twisted his ankle. Now, he didn't want 6 weeks off. I didn't want him to have 6 weeks off, but there was a medical professional that said, we best be cautious about this. It was incredibly frustrating. It was incredibly frustrating, but an example of a cost that you just don't see coming. I mean, I shudder to think how many small businesses that have gone, I'm just going to get a guy to help out, don't have a workers' comp policy.
That's a big one.
And whilst there's a small threshold, it's a very small threshold before you need that policy. I think it's about $5,000. Now, depending on how you're employing somebody, that creeps up on you real quickly.
I think that threshold may not even apply to our industry, so you can get caught out very quickly. I think that threshold allows for an in-home worker. So say, for instance, you've got a nanny that works for you and they do less than $5,000 in a year, they probably fly under that radar. But if you have a nanny that's doing more than $5,000 a year for you, like even just a handshake deal, then you got to start treating them like an employee and have a workers' comp policy.
And this is these are the things that we don't always see as business owners, and it's back to your one of your original questions. Should we be trained? Yes. Should we be trained in business? Yes. This is one of those things that you don't know until you need to know. But if it's too late before you need to know, it's incredibly expensive. It's the sort of thing that it could ruin your business.
That sort of mistake is a very hard lesson to learn.
I mean, we're lucky that we're in a commercial environment and our clients dictate what level of insurance coverage we have. They dictate that we've got to have a workers' comp policy. They dictate that we've got to have $20 million public liability. And they dictate that myself as a owner should probably have a personal injury policy and sickness policy.
I'm fortunate that I'm actually covered by my own workers' comp policy, so that in that regard, when they ask, I've got that up my sleeve there.
I'm also covered by our workers' comp policy, but we went the extra step of covering me because if something happens to me, the business is about as strong.
Fair enough.
It doesn't sort of matter how many systems we put in place. There are certain things in this business that I do that nobody else does yet or understands yet, and it's hard to, it's a hard one to train in.
That's it, isn't it? All the systems we put in place, it'll come crashing down until you get to the stage where you've employed somebody to replace you on absolutely everything.
Look, we've recently gone down the thought, do we get a business development manager in or do we get an operations manager in? Both with the idea to replace one of the roles that I do. The decision was it's probably more feasible to get an operations manager in because no one has the drive that the business owner has to push it forward. I'm the only one who has the passion for the business to push it to the next level and go and advocate for the business in front of a client. I I'm sure I can find somebody who'll do it for an exorbitant amount of money, but they're never going to have this. They're never going to have the same passion or need to do it as I do. So, as a small business owner, that's the secret sauce. Whilst you are everything, sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing. It's deciding when that's a good thing and when that's a bad thing. If operations can't work without you, that's probably not great. If sales and business-facing avenues can't work without you, that's probably indicative that's critical if you need to be there. So,
well, I guess that is a limiting factor in growing your business, right? So if you look at you being the person on the tools, then your limiting factor is how many jobs can you do in one day, or if you get an employee that you call an offsider, you can double that, but you don't actually double it. If you start growing to the point where you're going, okay, now my job is predominantly sales and quotes and bringing in new work, that's a massive limiting factor to find somebody who can replace you in that sales role as opposed to operations. It is like there are several factors that are massive hurdles to get over if you want to grow your business from solo to the point where it's a sellable business without you.
Yeah, and that's that's the way we've designed it. Not that I'm infallible and can't be sold without the business, but that our clientele are contracted. So when we walk into a property, we sell them the job. They sign online and say, this is the service that we're going to receive, and we're going to receive it for 12 months. Sometimes it's a longer term, sometimes it's a shorter term. It depends on what we're doing for them. I think it's important to realise that it's in the name. We are contractors, probably should walk with a contract.
Yeah.
And it provides value. It also provides a barrier to entry for some people. They don't want to sign things. But we make our agreements very, very simple, where this is the service that we're providing, and we expect to provide it for a year, or the period of time that we provide it for. And, tomorrow if I wanted to sell the business, I can turn around and say, we've got all these clients, this is the periods that they're going to be with me, and this is what I want for it, and there's some value. It's more than
yes,
implied goodwill.
Yeah, so if you don't have that, the implied goodwill will get varying mileage, right? So if I come to you and say, hey, I've got enough work for one person, that's all residential work, here's their contact details, Brodie, you can buy them off me, it's worth about one cut value. So for a small lawn business run, that's like $5,000, $10,000 sort of value, maybe, if you're lucky. You can say, hey, Brodie, come and meet these customers, mow the lawns once with me, do the gardens with me, and get an introduction. Maybe it's worth 3 to 5 times cut value. I think Jim's mowing, because they have a franchise set up, they might actually get a little bit over 10 times cut value. But when you're getting to the stage of what you're saying, the contract value is a lot more than just saying, hey, you're just buying goodwill. You're going, yeah, we're buying goodwill that's actually written down and signed and dated.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, there's definitely an implied value to having somebody like a Jim's. I think the franchise model, be it Jim's, be it Fox or Augusta or whoever it is, it sort of implies to the customer that somebody's always going to be there. And if they're moving from franchise owner to franchise owner, well, that's not at the end of the day, they're employing Jim's Mowing. They're not employing, Andy from down the street, who...
That's it, yeah.
Can sell it to whoever he wants. They know it's coming with systems and I guess you see these businesses on the market, they want to sell and it's goodwill. And the worst thing that a customer could have to do is come out and say to the new owner of the business, or the owner of them as a client, well, this is how I want the job done. They don't want to do that. They want to pay a bill. The client's job is to employ somebody and to pay the bill. As contractors, our job is to do everything in between to get it serviced. And if we're going to transfer that service from person to person, then we need to make that a seamless process for the customer, who's really doesn't. At the end of the day, customer doesn't care who mows their lawn. You prove that by sending a different staff member each week. They don't care. They want their lawn cut. They want it short. They want long grass short. They want it tidy. As long as we provide that, it usually goes all right. But if we start hassling them with, the other contractor did this, why aren't you doing that? Well, because it wasn't handed over and I didn't know.
Yeah.
Big problem.
Yeah, lack of communication, it's going to create problems.
Every time.
Yeah, well, Brodie, we have covered a couple of hours solid of a lot of rabbit holes, but really useful information, from that Air Spade through to a lot of business practices, and some good suggestions around knowing what you're doing, whether it's qualifications or however you get to the point where you can convey to your customer that you have a lot of knowledge and useful skills. Also, just want to mention briefly, when we're talking about timber mills, the timber that my brother is milling, because he's going to be listening to this, Macrocarpa cypress, Monterey cypress.
Very nice timber. Very nice timber.
So yeah, that's fairly common in Tassie. They use it as a windbreak on a lot of the farms, and so where the timber is now being felled, he's able to harvest it for next to nothing.
I can't say that I'm not jealous, so maybe I will have to go down to Tassie at one point in time.
And pay a truckload to get the truckload.
That's it.
A lot of transportation costs there. But yeah, no, thank you for your time. I think it's been great. I appreciate what you've contributed to the podcast, and also the, that initial rabbit hole of going, we talked about an Air Spade a couple of weeks ago, and now we get to actually get a really good understanding of the use and application for them.
Yeah.
It's, so much more.
I'll look at, and it's circling back to it, it is a brilliant tool for aerating around trees, shrubs, and in garden beds. There's so much that we can do with it, and we, it is a service that we provide not only to customers but also to other contractors. So, yeah.
And it's not a terribly expensive tool as far as a lawn care gardening business goes. It's like you can spend a lot more on a ride-on mower. But it is the sort of tool where you need to be providing a reasonable size service to make it worthwhile. You don't just go to your residential customer and say, hey, I'm bringing an Air Spade in. We're going to do a bit of work in your garden beds and loosen the soil up and rah, rah, rah.
They know to do that.
No, yeah, you're probably doing that when you've got a decent sized job to do with that, and you're going, well, I'm already set up for the day. That's for the work I'm doing for the day.
We are in a position where we can stack on services because we're already running the tool.
I've done that when I hired a cherry picker. So I did a little job with a cherry picker. I was like, all right, I'm going to line up 2 or 3 jobs for that cherry picker for the day, and that way that hedge gets trimmed nicely. I get to prune a couple of branches off that tree over there. Did 2 or 3 customers, spread the cost of the cherry picker over multiple customers, made it worthwhile.
Absolutely. Look, it's a good way and good lesson if you can do multiples. If you're stump grinding, book a couple of stump grinding jobs in. I think the Canards are doing them for about $300 a day. If you can spread that over 5 or 6 clients and quickly go in and knock out a few small stumps, then that's some decent money.
That's right.
You know, and it all adds up. But look, yeah, I guess, yeah, my advice is simple services. If you want to try something new, do it when it's quiet in winter and play around with some of those extras and, you know, stump grinding, wood chipping, and when you can afford the time.
Or excavator.
Or excavator, yeah.
Well, the key thing I learned from the excavator is, I assessed it initially and said, is there enough work for me to have a part of my business devoted to doing that? And I said yes. And then I realised after exploring that, it's not actually giving me enough work to justify keeping it. So I could have worked on that and improved that, but I chose to get rid of it instead.
Yeah, look, anyway. It's all about thresholds for tolerance, risk and otherwise.
Yeah.
Like, if you want to risk that it might sit there for 6 months doing nothing and, you make all your money in 6 months, that it is doing something, then that's viable. If you don't believe that you can do it or don't have the desire to do it that way, then it might not be a worthwhile purchase. I mean, hire companies these days, when we started out, hire companies, you could get, basic tools and equipment. These days you can hire pretty much anything you need, including the ride-on mower. So if you do only have one ride-on mower job, a month, it may well pay to just hire it rather than own it.
Yeah, for sure. And if you're experimenting, then definitely it's worthwhile to consider hiring a machine, even if you're running at a loss with the hire fees, just while you're assessing whether there's a viability in that model in your area.
Yeah. Oh, look, you can get every different model of, ride-on mower from most hire joints. It's going to give you a good idea of whether it's an efficiency time saving or not. I can't think of anything worse than spending tens of thousands of dollars on a piece of equipment only to find out that it's not actually going to make your life easier. You've just got to build.
Yep.
And there's the unforeseen costs of big equipment. And the bigger it gets, the more the cost there is. But
that's it.
You get a ride-on mower, you all of a sudden need a bigger trailer.
Yep.
If you don't have the right size ute, you're looking at a bigger ute or truck, depending on the size of equipment that you need. So, my local dealer, he's famous for telling me that I need a bigger mower. And I said, yeah, sure. When you give me the trailer to carry it on, we'll buy it. But he never wants to give me that trailer. So, I'd very much like the new 100-inch cut Toro rider. But
yeah, that looks interesting, doesn't it?
it's a great mower. I've used it, but it doesn't fit on the trailer. So I either need to buy a new truck or I need to buy a new trailer.
Yeah, that's it.
Neither of them come cheaply,
no. That's very true. Look, there's a lot of rabbit holes we could dive down there, and I think there's a lot of viability in different business models when it comes to the size mowers that you use. There's a lot of people in my area have gone down that path of having a ride-on mower, a zero-turn or a stand-on, because we have a lot of properties that are over 1,000 square metres. Yeah. I've seen one guy doing quarter acre blocks with a 60-inch zero-turn, and it's like, hang on a minute, why? But most of his jobs were acreage, and then he's doing a few quarter acre blocks.
We run 2 grandstands on a truck, a 60-inch and a 36-inch. 50-inch and a 36-inch. And the other day we rocked up to a front yard, 400 square metres. The 50-inch zero-turn stander fits in that front yard, so
and takes about 5 minutes to do it.
It took about a minute and a half to do it, but would I suggest going and getting a 50-inch mower? Absolutely not. It was there on the back of the truck. It was the first one off the back of the truck, so we used it.
There's more time loading and unloading than cutting grass.
Yeah. Bigger equipment's not always better, I guess is the message for newly starting businesses that I'm trying to instill. If you've got the market for it, then by all means go for it. But if you're just wanting to try out, it's not always better.
Yeah, look, I like to talk about numbers, and I think this is a good place to wrap that up. So you can use your 19-inch push mower or your 21-inch self-propelled machine, and you can still do $1,000 days. And, $1,000 day is potentially a $200,000 to $300,000 business. I would say 300's a push, but it's up there. It's doable. And if you are using a ride-on mower, you may not be more profitable. You may actually be sucking more money out than you're putting back in.
Yeah. For each ride-on we have on the back of that truck, it's a $60 fuel bill, if not more, depending on what the fuel price is. But, compared to a 5-litre jerry can, if you're running petrol or a couple of, 12-amp batteries, it's a huge difference in price and profit margin.
Yeah. So for new people starting out, you can start with the cheaper end of the tools. Still recommend getting commercial tools, but you might start with something that's not commercial. And then work out what business model is the most sensible one for the type of customers that you can find.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Brodie, hey, thanks for your time this evening. It's now evening instead of afternoon. It's almost dinner time.
Thank you for listening to Aussie Lawn Stars. Please remember to rate and review the show on the Apple Podcasts app or the player you use. Exciting new shows are released every Monday. Make sure you follow or subscribe to hear the next episode.